Welcome to
What's a block?
Triple Blockheads,
Back set. Block down.
the podcast for all things volleyball.
Blockhead.
Aloha and welcome to another episode of Triple Blockheads. Makani here with Frank and Mark. We're going to dive into a topic here that I'm sure a lot of our club athletes and prospects, as well as their parents, are really working through right now, guys. Normally, the development training, etc., commonly you would think that's happening in club, having your club coach or your club in general with their extended staff in a team atmosphere. But there's been an increasingly number of opportunities for athletes to get additional training, whether that be in or outside a club in the private lesson space. And I just want to dive into, what's good, what's enough, what's too little, is it too much? And why don't we just kind of level set on where we're seeing that private lesson situation happening around us? Frank, what's happening in your club?
Yeah, I think private lessons are something that's happening every day in the gym, and I want to preface my opinions on, like, I used to do a lot of private lessons as a way to, like, fund my college life. When you're not making a lot of money as an adult or as a college kid, like, and you have some volleyball experience, private lessons is a great way to make a little extra cash.
Tax-free. I was going to say
tax-free, yeah. That stuff, it's great. Great for coaches. There's coaches countrywide who are full-time private lesson coaches. They don't do anything else besides private lessons. There's where I'm from in SoCal, there's now volleyball gyms, spaces that are only operated with private lessons, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, there are so many kids doing private lessons in the club space, in our gym, and other clubs around us, and I'm sure all around the nation, private lessons is a poppin' thing. I think this is going to be a really cool conversation because I think there's a lot of different reasons why a kid would participate in a private lesson. What I see the most in our gym and other gyms is kids who are, and even the kids that I still work with now and within private lessons, or kids who are reaching out to me. I'm not having a good season right now with the team I'm with or the school team I'm with, or I'm in the off season. I just had not a great club season for whatever reason I think that is. So my confidence is super low, and they want parents and kids are looking at private lessons as a way to catch back up into potentially things that I wasn't able to capture during my season that I was just in. And I don't think private lessons should be that. I think that'll be the one thing we maybe agree on is what private lessons should be for. But what I'm seeing everywhere is kids who are using private lessons as a way to get ahead, or to play into that coach's favor. Like, I think once we start announcing coaches for our age groups, you'll start seeing certain age groups only trying to do lessons with that coach because they want to maybe be one leg ahead going into the team selection process. So I think there's a lot of hidden agendas sometimes behind private lessons.
Respect on the strategy, though.
Yeah,
done.
It's a real thing. Like that kid might not have a great tryout, but then in our coaching feedback, one of our coaches is like, "Well, I do lessons with her, and she looks great in lessons." But it's like, you're not doing 6-on-6 during lessons. So that's the thing that I think there's just a lot that sometimes is coming expectation-wise from the person that's taking the lesson that I don't know is necessarily appropriate for a private lesson, or what should be used for a private lesson.
What do you think should be used for a private lesson then, if
So-
it's not to? Because what I heard through part of that is to get back ahead or catch up on maybe a skill or facet that they seemingly have not mastered yet.
Yep.
That to me is a great reason to do a private lesson, right? I can focus on one skill, something that I feel like I'm struggling with, get some individual attention, lots of quality reps, and then return to club or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm seeing the most is kids who are doing a lot of private lessons, but only doing private lessons. So they're not capturing any 6-on-6 play or any just like live play or catching any patterns that you would gain from going to play 3-on-3 sand or something. Those kids are just doing five lessons a week, one-on-ones, and they're not actually playing. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. All right, that makes sense.
And you're specifically talking off season, right? Because there's kind of the delineation between off season. When I say off season club, and the private lessons that are happening there, and then it's in season club, and the private lessons that are happening there also, right? And I think if we compartmentalize those two things, I think the opinions change in some sense, right?
I totally agree. I think if you're doing private lessons in season, I think that's a separate thing, separate conversation compared to if you're doing private lessons in the off season. Most of the private lessons that we see in our gym are usually all in the off season. In the summer, you get some kids who are doing some private lessons before like our club practices actually start that night, but those kids usually aren't in the club. They're usually playing for a team that maybe isn't as competitive, so they're using private lessons as a way to maybe like have more of a competitive experience, because of the team situation that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, we want to talk about off season first.
Yeah, let's go. Let's stick with off season.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you gotta play. Like, if it was my kid, like, I'm good with doing a lesson maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, and then try and take those tactical things into playing. But like, if you're just doing private lessons and that's it, that's your whole summer plans to do private lessons, or that's the majority of your plan, I don't think you're gonna benefit as much as if you didn't do any lessons and you just played 2-on-2 sand all summer, or you played 3-on-3 grass all summer.
Yeah, I think there's knowing that the length of the club season is so long. Let's just throw some dates out there, right? So high school season, if they're in high school, let's just go younger. So let's say you're not in high school, so you don't have a middle school team. So from August through November, that's the dead period, lack of a better term, right? There's no club team activities happening in that space. So that's really what we're talking about there. In the high school space, so 15s and up, that time period there's not a lot of time that they're not in something, right? Whether it's high school, JV, varsity, whatever it is, and club.
Yeah.
Because they're playing high school in July in like team camps or whatnot, and then all the way through to the next the following July with nationals, early July or end of June. So that period is really small. So what you're saying is the private lessons during that period, you're developing your skills. You're not actually getting any game rep or scenario rep, et cetera.
Yeah, I think what I notice is with our kids who are playing such a long season, we don't see them doing private lessons. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are so in whatever that they're in, But the kids who are doing the most private lessons are the ones that feel like they're probably behind.
Mm.
So they're using private lessons as a way to maybe catch up.
Mark, your rebuttal?
I don't think I have one right now. I'm gonna save it till we keep moving on.
Yeah. So I mean, I think because the off season part of it is so small, I think let's talk about in season, and I think that could be like in high school or in club. Like if you're you're already on a team and you're having normal practices, whether that's every day in high school or 2-3 times a week in club. I know I see a lot of times where athletes are taking these private lessons, maybe sometimes 2 or 3 different avenues of private lessons from different people. I guess what are the pros and cons from kind of getting a collective view or multiple voices in those settings of training?
I have a couple different opinions on this. Overall, I really like players having different coaches. Everyone coaches a little bit differently. They have a different way of saying probably a similar thing to the way I would. So sometimes that can connect the dot a little bit quicker. If I'm trying it this way and you do a private with somebody else and they say what I said but with a twist and it works for you, like I'm all for it as long as we get to where we're going. Overall, I don't have an issue. I think players should be coached by multiple coaches throughout their career because you can find the congruencies between skill instruction on what you actually need, right? Some may be super strict on shoulders down stuff, passing, or early platform stuff. But if you have enough coaches trying to teach you things, you can pick apart all right, they're all talking about my body position. So that's probably something that I need to adjust. You know what I mean? I think that can be a benefit, but that is more on the player getting the private lesson, I would say, than the coach that's instructing them. You know what I mean? I think where you kind of get into some hairier issues is you go to a high school with a very storied program and a coach that's been there for a long time, and they have their system, and that's what they do, and that's what they're going to expect of you. If you go do privates and you're getting something different from that very specific system, that could directly impact your experience at your high school team or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So that's definitely something to weigh, pros and cons, as you're picking who you go through to private lessons or frequency, or even what you focus on through those private lessons, right? If I have a really intense defensive system that I use and they require me to do X, Y, Z at this high school, if I do a private with somebody not involved with that system, I'm probably not working on defense during that segment, right? I'm going to focus on my serving or attacking or something that is a little less stringent where I can still improve, but not detract from the potential playing time or whatever from creating habits opposite or different from the system that is being required.
Mm-hmm. I think you said something there that I think we'd all agree with, is that the athlete needs to have some level of planned outcome, right? Like what is your intent? What are your expectations for that private lesson? And I think all too often we're like, oh, I'm going to work on passing. Okay, cool. We're going to work on passing. You're going to pass, 1,000 balls in a 3-session private. Okay. And then how are you? And then I think it's then how are you translating that individual skill progression into your team? And are you seeing that benefit? I think it depends, and I think to your point, understanding who you're going to private lessons for and what technical cues they use or what type of philosophies they have is really, really important. For example, if you are a setter and going to go through private lessons and you have one private lesson coach that teaches spin setting, and then you have another private lesson coach that is much more stationary and much more about their feet, and then you have your high school coach or your club coach is around, hey, I don't want you to jump set. Then you have 3 different philosophies. And I think what I've seen in the past is, especially when you have those differentiations in philosophy, the athlete sometimes plateaus because they're getting good enough in one, and then they are training in another. And then they're getting good in that one, and then they train in the other. I think the experiences to figure out what works for them makes a lot of sense. But at some point, you have to pick a path if there's differentiation to that level.
Yeah, I think that's two-sided. I think that is really important for the coaches that do lessons, like knowing what time of the season we are all in at that moment and framing parts of your lesson to match what they're currently doing system-wise. So like having those conversations with that player, like, hey, what does your coach currently expect out of you in this situation? And then the best I can do as a private lesson coach is try to give her reps in the situation that she's going to be in next week. You know what I mean? Instead of like, maybe there's some different philosophies on like where you should be at in your base. Like, so if we're doing some defensive stuff, that's probably something I'm going to ask a player when we're in season is like, hey, where are you starting at in this situation? Let's put you there, even though I might think differently about it, So I think that's, if you can get a coach that is able to tailor some of those differences based on maybe what you're doing right now in season, that's a really good situation that I think makes sense for if you're doing a private lesson one time every month.
I think that the takeaway to all this is the communication piece, right?
Yeah.
I've done privates where they come in and don't have anything specific that they want to work on, and I just plan an hour and we just crank it out. But that dialogue of being able to talk about your system and the situation you're in and what you're feeling on the court, can continue to build that confidence piece, which if that's what they're looking for, that's a great way to do it, but also gives them a little bit of ownership in their process of learning, which I think is paramount to actually making strides and avoiding that plateau piece, right? We're not always introducing new concepts. What are you working on right now? All right, let's take that and see how we can advance and maybe tweak here or there as we go through that lesson.
Now, if you're on the other side of it, if you're on the other side and your player's going to a lesson with another coach and they're actually talking about your team systems and doing what we maybe agree is the right way to run a lesson, tailor it kind of to your system.
Well, I'll stop there though. I think it's dual accountability though. The coach as the private lesson coach that is getting athletes coming to them, there's an accountability to learn more about the athlete and what their expectations are.
Yeah.
But there's equal accountability for the athlete to promote and really be a strong advocate for what they are looking to do and understanding that what system that they are wanting to pursue. That doesn't mean that you can't explore other things during a private, right? But you have to advocate for yourself as well as that the coach being a good advocate for you.
If you're the other coach, though, that actually has that kid on your team during that season, what do you think is an appropriate way to feel about that, about your kid doing lessons on the side, even though it is tailored to, what's going on in your practice?
I'm fine with it. Like, I'm all for it. You want extra reps, when whatever facet, there's I feel like rarely situations where getting more touches is bad. As my player going, again, that's you're hearing something differently and maybe it connects those dots in a better way. As long as they're not just out here just absolutely trashing my systems and the way that I train to my current player, like I'm probably okay with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm going to keep it real. And this is not where we really wanted to go with this conversation, but I do think it's a lot to be said in the environment that we're living in club. Is that, to your point, Frank, that club coach, especially club, not as much high school, but that club coach, are they discouraging private lessons because of the concern for them to go somewhere else?
100%.
And I think that's more the reality of the environment and much less about private lessons themselves.
Yes. It's one of the hidden agendas of private lessons. And if I am the coach where my kid is going to do lessons with someone else, even if it's like inside of the club, I am taking a moment to self-reflect within my own team culture to try and figure out, does that kid need more reps in practice? Like, why does that kid feel like she needs lessons to still get ahead or connect differently? You know what I mean? Like, is there a way that I can do that within my own team structure so that she feels like she can get extra reps when she needs it without the need to pay for a lesson? You know what I mean? Like, I should be able to provide that in a way. You know what I mean? If I am the head coach of the team.
And not to continue down that rabbit hole, but I think that's also why you see some of these clubs start positional lessons during club season as an advantage to keep them in-house, right? So, like, for example, like setters. So, hey, you're in my club. You're going to 3 times a week on my ones team, but we're also going to have on 2 of the off days, there's going to be a setter available opportunity for you to come and train under our roof. That, from the club's view, incubates that person into your club versus maybe there's a really awesome setting coach that's out there who's not under your roof, not under that club, that they could learn from. However, if for some reason maybe that club coach has affiliates with another club or that setting coach with another club, there's that concern of them maybe going somewhere else.
I think ultimately it's, as a coach, it's trusting your product, right? If your kids are unhappy, they're going to leave regardless, right? It's not about them taking a lesson and getting poached by this coach. If they connect better with that coach and they're going to help their development, go do it over there. Ultimately, and this is my perspective as a college coach where I don't coach club and I'm not involved in that little
politics part of it, yeah.
Piece of it, right? The goal is to make that kid better at volleyball, right? If that's your overarching theme goal to how you approach your training, whether it's from me or from somebody else or from a third party or whatever, as long as that kid's improving and enjoying and still loving the sport, I'm game. You know what I mean? That may be a bit too altruistic for the club environment, but that's kind of where my head is through this process.
I think I want to remind the listeners that we're framing this from an in-season perspective,
Right.
Because I think the opinions maybe change a bit when we're out of season for kids who are just not with a team from May to start a high school season. But I don't know. In season, I think if it was my kid going to get lessons, like hopefully it's because like that's the only way that they can get gym time to get extra reps. But I think I would like to think we're creating a place, at least in our gym, creating a place where if a kid wants extra reps, they know what they should be working on, and they're empowering their teammates to come in and do that with them. And maybe you don't need a coach there to toss you balls because you already know what you're trying to rep out. You don't maybe need to review concepts as much as you just need the time to create chemistry. But I'm thinking high level probably, I'm thinking like high level 15, 16, 17 is probably is kind of where my brain is at when I'm talking about that.
Yeah, and I think where you see, my experience with people requesting private lessons are either very positional specific, or someone who is still trying to find what they are, right? Like that 2's team kid, or that 3's team kid, or the kid that is, maybe not really sure if they're going to be a pin or a DS, or so they're like focusing different things to figure out what clicks for them. But I think we'd all agree there is value in the right mode and the right method for those private lessons and those extra reps. So to continue that with that assumption, frequency, like how often do you think these types of lessons should happen, whether they're in, I guess, specifically in season, but then also how long those sessions should last?
I'll go. I have my opinions on this. If you're in season, let's say you practice, normally your club practices twice a week. I think doing 2 is not a terrible thing. Once you get into more heavy tournament schedules where consistently on weekends you're going to 2 and 3 day tournaments into your qualifier season, that probably drops just from a time constraint. But I strongly encourage kids to have at least 1 day off in the week. And if you're practicing 3 times a week, I'm probably only doing 1 private during that time. Duration wise, I think no more than an hour, right? That if you go longer than that, in my head, it becomes less specific and more broad. And now we're bringing in new concepts and different things that can detract from the focus of why they came, which is to improve at X, Y, Z. I want to get better at passing deep balls. Okay, cool. We're going to work over your left shoulder and right shoulder. Here's some different scenarios: fast, deep, high, deep. Right. Let's really hone in on that drop step move and how we're approaching that piece. If it goes longer than an hour, suddenly we're into something else.
I think depends on if we're in season or out of season. I think I think if two teammates are going to the gym to work on serving deep or passing deep balls, serving deep too, it's like they might sometimes struggle with how do we create a situation amongst me and my teammate to get good reps. And that's when I think maybe checking in with a coach about a private lesson will allow you to learn the structure of how you two can rep out things together when you have space in the gym. But then I think once you accomplish like some framework for how to make the most of your time that you want to put in the gym, the extra time, then I don't think you need a coach there with you.
Yeah.
I think you just need you and a teammate who now have a framework that a coach has helped you build, and then go rep things out. Just make sure you're being detailed about how you're creating those deep pass situations, And I think the more players can get empowered to giving themselves private lessons almost, in a sense, the more our game advances because they're gonna be in the gym as much as they want to be in the gym.
Terry Pettit released an article that he wrote where he calls that lonely practice. And 100% right. Like growing up as a basketball player, like it's really easy to pop into a gym and get a bunch of shots up working on specific I'm working on my one dribble right and pull up. You know what I mean? You can get that easily. You need a basketball hoop. Volleyball has a few different barriers, so the private lesson allows for that space to learn. But if you have that space, you got to love lonely practice, right? Because that's really how you figure it out in your mind. And I think part of it is depending on what kind of learner you are, right? Versus whether you want to do it alone, whether you'd be better in a group. You know what I mean? If I'm more visual versus feel in the way that I learn, I'm probably going to want more people in that group.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that I can see more people do it and try and figure it out through there. But if I am a totally feel learner and need to experience it and diagnose kind of what's going on in my head and how it feels, then I might cater a little bit more to that one-on-one and might lean towards coach-led stuff a little bit differently.
Yeah, for sure. So I think to answer the question is like, in season, get in the gym as much as your curiosity like leads you to want to do that. Just ask for a coach help, ask for a coach lesson or whatever we call that, a lesson, or just ask for some help from a coach to how to plan that maybe, because they're going to have experience in dealing with players that are as curious as you about your development. And then I think once you're out of season, like if it was me going back to being a player, I think I would want maybe a lesson, maybe once a week, once every couple weeks, just to like have them check out a couple things in my setting, spin, or whatever it is I'm trying to maybe add into my game. And then I'm going to go try to add that into my grass volleyball scrimmages or my adult open gym or my little friend group that plays every week. You know what I mean? So that I can also continue to learn on how to win and how to compete and make sure I don't, lose parts of that within the whole private lesson, gym vibe thing,
Have you ever done a private or a small group lesson where you just played like narrow court doubles and stuff like that, like to
so
get
if I
that
have
competitive?
I don't do a lot of lessons now, but when I do lessons, and let's say I've had this kid for a little bit, so maybe I'm like 3 months in working with this kid. I work with her maybe once every couple weeks. As we start like getting back into it, it's like how do we create some pressure? So like I'll put them through like a ladder levels concept, and I'll empower them to come up with some of the focuses to accomplish this drill. And then at the very tail end of that drill, it's like, hey, we have to serve 3 out of 4 balls in this seam. And if we don't get it done, we're going to start over. And we're going to have to go through the first layer of the drill, accomplish what we have to accomplish there, level 2. So if it's a one-on-one, I'm trying to create some game-like feelings that player is going to have to process and talk to themselves about in an actual match. And then if it is like a 2-person, 3-person, 4-person group lesson, like I am still trying to apply some sort of scoring aspect, at least by the end of the lesson, so that we are taking something that we worked on and trying to apply it to scoring.
We talked about like the two different concepts, right? Private, like a one-on-one, and then a private lesson relative to small group. Do you guys prefer one or the other?
I think it is player-driven a little bit more. I think sometimes if you're starting or early in your coaching career, one-on-ones, making effective one-on-ones can be hard because you just don't have the bodies, right? You got to really know what you're doing to be able to structure, like Frank said, and put them in the emotional states that they need to be in, that they will see in games that they're not getting because you are one person with one person. So early off as a coach, I would lean more to small group stuff. You can structure a pass set drill or pass set hit a little bit differently. But I think it ultimately is up to the type of learner they are. Just kind of going back to that, but it's how you best learn, and you kind of have to be able to self-evaluate and know what style you prefer. But as far as a coach, I'm good with either.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good with the group lesson if the skill levels are all pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you might have one kid who needs more attention than another, and that's really hard to manage that in a group lesson. But if the group lessons are all close, then there's, you can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think, the small group sessions you have a lot of different ways you can structure them, right? You can have, hey, I'm going to do a small group lesson with a group of athletes that are in different positions. Therefore, you have the ability to do combo drills in a private lesson setting. You also can do a small group in a very specific manner. All right, I'm going to get all the libs. I'm going to get all the middles. I'm going to get all the setters. And you do those things in a very focused skill setting in a small group. Sometimes that also is beneficial because there's not a lot of burnout. When you go one-on-one, again, if you don't know how to structure it, you can kill that athlete in 5 minutes, and then the remaining 55 minutes of your hour is just trying to drag them through the remaining 60. You know. So I mean, I think either way, it really does work based on what you are talking to that coach about. And I think that's where it continues to come back. You said something really critical, and as an example for the listeners, on what a specific skill that you can communicate to your coach. I need to work on passing a deep serve. Like, that's better than, hey, I need to work on volleyball. Like, and that happens, right? Sometimes I just need to work on volleyball. But like that, if you can get to that point, then there is a very clear message to the coach on what you need to do and what you like to spend your time on and what, quite honestly, your parent is paying for. And also, like, from your sense, you're thinking about and understanding what the expectation is of the session itself.
Yeah, I think what your expectations are going into a lesson is like one of the most important things for sure. Like, I think we all agree that going into a private lesson, what you should expect to gain is a technical feel. If you can feel something different after that lesson, that's about all you should be trying to capture in a lesson if you're going about it in a healthy way. But I think if you're looking to make a different club team, if you're looking to all the other little side agendas, if you're looking just for more confidence, I just think there's different ways to do that are still more productive for your game than doing private lessons. And I think the majority of club lessons are, very few of them are probably there to capture a new technical feel on something.
Feels like a pretty broad statement there.
Yeah, you think so?
Frank, you're just blanketing all club private lessons as,
I don't know.
Like, put a % on it. What you got?
I think I don't know. I don't have enough data. I don't want to.
Okay, there we go. All right, that's all I was looking for.
I'm just comparing maybe the majority of kids I see doing lessons in our gym and the gyms around us are not the elite level kids. I feel like those kids feel almost a little settled in where they're at club level wise. So
let me challenge that thought though. Should it not be equally as important for that high level prospect as, let's call him a 16U, top level prospect? Everybody knows they're a great player that's going to go on to a P4 school, to challenge themselves with a private lesson or a small group lesson with a different voice. Because if they get comfortable, and this is just my opinion on just like that athlete and their ability to adapt and change and flex, that if they get comfortable with one coach or one club and one philosophy, that are they going to be able to flex those change muscles and that change management that they're going to have to as they get to the next level?
I think anything they're doing with their teammates there is good stuff when you're in season, for sure. So if you're a setter, you take your 3 middles and you go do a lesson somewhere else or with a different coach in the club, like you're with your teammates, so you're actually working on the things that produce more effectiveness, creating a little more chemistry or just trying to establish something with that combination of pieces versus you maybe going by yourself in season and then going back into your team system and hoping the rest of the variables kind of work out so that you see like success from your lesson, I guess, if that makes sense.
I think the really driven kids are going to do it regardless of where they are in that depth chart. You know what I mean? Whether they're the 16U stud or that third team kid, like if you love the sport and you want to keep improving, that may be an avenue that you take. And I don't have an issue solo or team based from there either.
And I think the last kind of like wrinkle to this conversation that I'll have is kind of similar to some other topics that we've talked here, episodes in the past specifically around club. There's such a push and an emphasis on winning in club because of it's the business of club, right? How many trophies do you have? How many regionals? How many bids do you get? So during club practices, there are a lot of competitive type drills. And I think especially for those that are struggling to find the court, as well as people that are wanting to go to the next level, if you're not challenging yourself technically, then I think you are getting better in the 6-on-6 in the competitive side. But how are you really developing a consistency in those contacts, whether it's I'm going to be a consistent passer, a consistent deliverer of the ball as a setter, or I'm always going to be available as a middle. Those are things that you can work on in bursts in a private lesson. But I think it always comes back down to is if you're the athlete, you have to know how you are owning your development journey as that prospect. And in that sense, if you do a private and you're going to work on your transition as a middle, okay, great. When you go back to your club team in practice and you're doing a competitive drill because it's the middle of April, you're preparing for nationals coming up in a couple of months, are you doing those same things? Or are you just trying to win? Mm-hmm. Because yes, you want to win, but at the same time, if you really want to continue to progress, you need to translate that technical side and that technical training into live play.
Yeah.
So a lot of really good, this is a really good topic, and I think we can kind of pick this back up on a couple of different type of avenues as we continue down our path here. But we are going to do something different here now as we start moving forward with dropping these episodes. We're going to ask you, our other blockheads that are out there, what other type of comments and questions you might have for the three of us. Go ahead and drop those down here below on the link, or hit us on any of the socials. We'll have a blockhead reach back out, and maybe it becomes a topic. Who knows, guys?
I want to apologize in advance to all of my coaches that do lessons at the gym. I hope that they all keep doing lessons with you.
And if you're upset about the decrease in your private lessons, go ahead and reach out to Frank. All right, with that being said, thanks, and catch you next time.
Blockheads!
Thanks for checking out this episode of Triple Blockheads. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode.